I talk a lot on this channel about mindset and how you can reach your creative goals and generally just be the best painter you can be in a way that is sustainable for the long haul. So, if you're a regular viewer or listener, first of all, thanks. I got to meet so many of you at this year's Portrait Society of America conference, and every single person who came up and said hi or thank you or simply introduced yourself, it meant so much. And on top of that, for anyone who watches my videos and is on faculty at Portrait Society or has been a finalist, I'm honestly floored. I'm so honored. All of you make such incredible work, and I'm so humbled that you enjoy what I do, and it just makes me want to do even more, make even better videos, even better paintings. But if you're a regular and you haven't been to Portrait Society's annual Art of the Portrait conference, I would make it a priority, like right now. Get on their email list so that when the details for 2024 come out, you can see whether you can make that happen. And in this video, I'm going to talk a bit about why it's important and helpful to attend events like these through discussing what I learned at this year's conference, but more importantly, the ways in which it nourished me, creatively speaking, so that even if you were not there this year, you can still get some of that benefit, and hopefully this will inspire you to attend events like these in the years to come. If you aren't familiar with the Portrait Society conference, it is the biggest event that I'm aware of that is dedicated to portrait and figurative artists. Not everyone there is a painter. There are sculptors, watercolorists, oil painters, and artists specializing in all sorts of dry media, though you'll probably hear me talk most about oil painting since that's what I do, and that's the lens through which I process events like these. At last year's event, I was struck by how helpful it was to see so many amazing artists working in person. And this year, I actually feel like my focus was much more on the people rather than the painting. I loved hearing about how so many artists work, their process for finding models, having people sit for them, digging into someone's personality to capture their true self on canvas, and what they struggle with and what helps them. I was especially surprised at just how many painters felt so energized being around other artists. I think we imagine artists, or at least I imagine artists living in places like New York, where they are constantly rubbing elbows with other amazing creatives, or maybe they're working in a giant studio space surrounded by incredible talent. But most of us, especially those working at a really high level, turns out we work in isolation. You know, we live in sleepy towns, places with affordable costs of living, places that aren't necessarily known for art. And while our friendships with other artists might be strong, we are largely working alone. I thought about this because I often wonder if it's just me, if I need to move or uproot my life in some radical way to get where I want to professionally or creatively. And being at an event like this and hearing the truths and more about the lives of other artists, I realized this just isn't true. But we do need people, and that's different. Last year, I spent a lot of time at the conference watching people work and feeling so surprised by what I saw. Putting my art on YouTube, it's really easy to think that I need to have cleaner block-ins, or that I need to find the drawing faster, or I need to work quicker, or I need to be more loose or more painterly. I think it's easy to worry about these sorts of things when we are in a bubble, and it's even easier when we put what we do out there for all to see and comment on. But watching artists work at this conference, I was struck by just how varied and honestly imperfect the creative process not only can be, but has to be. Artists whose work is absolutely incredible can have messy starts, or be slow to block in, or have paintings that just feel too tight. And they can go from there and make amazing pieces off of that foundation. Really diving into that aspect of painting and watching how other painters work last year, it really helped me to stop worrying so much about what I was doing and just paint. And seeing that again this year gave me a much needed boost, reassurance, a reminder not to be so self-conscious and just make things. But this year, I think the thing that stood out to me most was how much we as artists need each other as people. We need to geek out over a master's process or just how expertly they handle their paint. We need to talk about ideas we have for paintings and hear others get excited about them and encourage us. We need to walk up to a stranger and tell them just how amazing we think their work is. I know that this struck me last year, but it really hit home for me this year. I see plenty of people who are quick with critique, ready to point out a painting that they don't like, or a technique that they think could be improved, or a likeness that wasn't quite achieved. But at a place like this conference, you are surrounded by professionals, not haters, not catty amateurs. No one is looking over their shoulder hoping that no one is going to come along and surpass them. Instead, people are so genuinely excited to see what other artists are doing, how other artists are pushing the bar. And professionals know just how much sweat and labor and effort and heart you put into being where you are, and how much you'll continue to put in to reach whatever it is you're aiming for. It's this environment of empathy and support and encouragement. And if that has amounted to any one takeaway, I'd say it's that I want to be painting all the time. I want making art to be a default activity, whether I'm in my studio or out in the world. I don't want to forget what it's like to be with this group of people and be so inspired and just let go of inhibitions around creating. Some of my favorite sessions this year were ones where I was watching artists who just seemed to be painting constantly. James Gurney is one such artist whose breakout session just really struck me. He went through his sketchbook, and it's not too different from, what you would observe watching his incredible YouTube videos, honestly. But there was something about being there in the room with him while he talked through page after page of his notebook that made me wonder, James, are you ever not painting? I actually asked him this, and he explained that, you'd be surprised how long it takes to edit YouTube videos. And it just kind of left me with this impression that, okay, at any given moment, James is either sleeping, editing a YouTube video, or painting. And there's not really a lot of extra room on top of that, just based on the sheer volume of sketches, paintings that I saw from him. It seemed like everywhere he went, there was a sketch, immortalizing whatever that time is, whether he was just running an errand or whether he was at some event. One of my friends that I got to spend a good bit of time with at the conference this year is Julia Madalena, and I got to see glimpses of her sketchbook, her notebook after the conference, and she was in just about every session taking copious notes, but not just that, she had drawings from all of these sessions. She drew the model, she drew the speaker. Again, it was just this default activity. And it made me realize that I think so often we get hung up on this idea of making the perfect piece that we stop ourselves from just making it an everyday mundane task. There's this sort of duality between doing something exceptional and doing something mundane. And I think that's kind of a false dichotomy. I think doing something really exceptional probably comes out of having what seems like a mundane practice. Making a masterpiece requires hundreds of just kind of regular old everyday sketches, and probably quite a lot of sketches or paintings that we would never want to show anybody. And this brings me to my next takeaway, which is that I want to stop being so afraid to simply sit down with people and ask to paint them. Hearing about how different artists found their models, whether it was through traveling to remote villages, or seeing an interesting character around town and approaching them, or simply deciding to paint your doctor in their office, surrounded by piles and piles of paperwork and folders and charts. It made me realize just how easy it is for us to convince ourselves that it is just too much of an imposition to ask people if they would like to sit and model for a painting. And we lose so many opportunities to connect with people by way of painting them, and that is such a genuine shame. Hearing just how humbled and honored and excited people were to be able to sit for a painter really just made me realize how much time I've wasted in being afraid to even approach people. And I know it's not just me, because through my mentorship, I help artists to overcome this every day. And I know just how ubiquitous this feeling is, and I don't want it to be. So I hope that this really hits home for you as well. I've already actually approached somebody, a couple of people actually, telling them that I would really like to have them sit for me. And it's not just like a friend who comes over to my house all the time, and so it's no big deal. Like, this is somebody that I just have a professional relationship with. And, you know, because of that, like, asking them to sit felt, oh my gosh, like I would be wasting their precious time. And I'm just really sad that I felt that way. And I think if this is something that you relate to, I'm sad that you feel this way too. I'm sad that all of us can kind of get in our heads about this, because it's such a special thing to paint somebody. And finally, I don't want to just be in the same practice mode. I don't want to paint just for practice or, you know, to get some YouTube footage for the week. I want to work on something big, something exciting. And I have a few ideas. So if you want to see how I go from idea to fruition, stick around, hit subscribe, hit the bell icon, because there's more to come. If you want to hear more about the conference, I would recommend checking out my video on last year's event, which I will link in the upper right-hand corner. I was checking my notes from last year and prepping this year's video, and there was so much I wanted to say that I honestly feel like I captured perfectly in last year's video. So rather than simply repeating it, I would encourage you to go ahead and check it out. And until next time, happy painting.